By the 5th minute, I'll take you then. I will not be looking at the chat, so I cannot see the chat, again, through voice. That said, starting my speech. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Imagine walking into a white room and you see your mother. You try to greet her, but unfortunately, when she turns to you, she doesn't even remember your face. She doesn't even remember that she has a child. I think these are the different experiences that people have when it comes to people who lose their memories. But secondly, I think it is also quite sad when you see a person that you know the best, that you know so well, forget about you and forget about all the moments that you cherish with one another. I think it is where you have this replay technology. Are you able to cherish that moment? Are you able to mitigate those instances of forgetting one of the best decisions of your life, whether that is the child that you gave birth to or whether that is the mother that you are able to see every now and then. Understand, therefore, let's just characterize a few things. When we talk about this replay technology and what we mean to preference, right? When we prefer a world that pushes for everyone to have this type of technology, I think this motion in and of itself presumes access. So I don't think opposition can easily just say, oh, not everyone has access to the technology, when the motion in and of itself already discusses this. But secondly, I think because it is a preference motion, it is a matter of whether or not we should weigh the extent of impacts. I don't think it should merely be debated in absolutes. Right. Then going on to my constructives. Firstly, I think when you have the application of this technology, it further advances and betters human society. 4 main levels towards this. Firstly, understand that in every science technology motion, there's probably an implication about innovation, right? But the difference in this motion, particularly in replay, is that it delves into the cognitive workings of the brain and cognitive workings in terms of being able to allow us to replay and recall that memory. Understand that the brain in and of itself is a black box considered to human society. It's very difficult to study and we aren't sure about all these things. But when you allow replay to happen, there's a presumption that we've gone to that point where we are able to delve into the human brain. But secondly, I think beyond the studies of how the technology works, I think this also has practical implications in other industries, like in the medical field, where you're able to mitigate diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, where kids don't have to worry about seeing their mom only to have been forgotten by the very woman that birthed her. And I think in and of itself, in cases of where you have amnesia because you got into a car accident, you can mitigate those things in the first place, right? But secondly, I think even on the application aspect of the doctors who are committing to surgeries are doing very difficult surgeries that have marginal percentages of success, right? I think they're able to replay their experiences or relive those memories or moments where they had instances of success in certain surgeries, know where exactly they failed, and are able to post-process what specifically they should do and should not do, thereby minimizing the margin of error that might exist in that surgery. But thirdly, I think in the application of the law, right? I think witnesses in certain crimes are able to replay or at least are able to replay and recall what specifically were the things that happened at the time of the crime, where they're able to ensure that they have all pieces of evidence, review and remember closely what specifically was the face and place in which the perpetrator committed the crime. I think this is where you also lessen the tendency of things like victim blaming, insofar as the victim cannot necessarily be blamed at instances where they forgot something at those cases. I think overall, this is integral in order to improve a lot of the mechanisms and systems in society, not only in terms of the legal aspect of it, but I think also in the perspective of how this ends up affecting different challenges that a lot of humans face when it comes to things like time-pressing surgeries, things like time-pressing court trials, and the like. The POI, preferably from closing. If it's not from closing, I'll take opening.
Yeah, so obviously in good circumstances, for example, the surgeon or replaying crimes already in the status quo, like doctors have incentive to check up on medical records, for example, to make sure that you're not going to fuck up.
I think the difference between checking medical records and being able to replay a memory is that you are able to simulate the experience that you've had as you did that surgery, as opposed to looking to the medical records. I think the extent in which you are able to recall things or able to diagnose things is different when you look at medical records, as opposed to how exactly as you, the doctor, are going to approach this once you commit to that surgery. I think those are fundamentally two different things. At best, medical records can help you diagnose, but in terms of being able to know how to approach it, minimizing that margin of error, you get that better with replay. But secondly, I think generally, like beyond like the practical aspects, there's a principle level towards this. I think remembering things makes you happy. Understand that in and of itself, it's very difficult to remember a lot of things in life, especially the moments that you cherish the most. Insofar as these moments are probably moments where you're in parties, gatherings, of family gatherings, or things like reunions and the like, or prom, all of which are gatherings and experiences that have presence of substances that make it difficult to remember. Things like alcohol, things like drugs like marijuana or like cocaine, all those party drugs, or even things like cigarettes, clog your ability to recall the different moments in which you particularly feel happy or what you find valuable in that moment. I think these moments in and of itself are difficult to remember, not only because of those substances, but at the point in which you are experiencing that moment in your life, you're probably focused on trying to feel that experience as opposed to thinking about, oh, I need to remember this, I need to record this, I need to take a picture of all these things, right? I think in and of itself, replaying a memory is quite fundamentally different from being able to see a memory through a picture or through a video. But secondly, I think this is where you're also able to replicate all those details as for where exactly the stars were aligned, where you're able to see and diagnose what exactly are the things that made every little detail in that memory so perfect. I think it looks like you being able to replay those magical hikes that you've had during dawn, or things like being able to see the smiling faces of the people in your wedding, even though these were things that you were not necessarily focusing on as you were like walking down the aisle as a bride, right? But you are able to replay that experience for yourself and understand and see where exactly what other details made this moment so perfect. I think this is at the point in time where you cherish different moments, and this is where you get to maximize that extent of happiness by reliving those things in the first place. But even if opposition comes here talking about, oh, this is bad in terms of trauma, because people are going to be required to replay these things, I think firstly, it's a choice to even replay what specific moment in your life that you want to do. But secondly, I think this in and of itself, beyond like the individual experience, we've also talked about what it looks like in the practical applications of society. Generally, I think if people want to be happy or be able to ensure that they remember things, but not only remember things, also able to minimize margins of errors, replicate certain experiences, you get that better when you have replay. For all these reasons more, very proud to propose. Thanks.
I thank the Prime Minister for the speech. I'd like to next invite the Leader of Opposition.
All right, am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, please put your POIs in the chat. I will try and I will look in the chat and I will try and take one at around 5:30-ish. All right. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. All right, first I want to clarify some things because opening government just seems to have gotten wrong what replay is. Replay is not a replaying of emotion in the sense that you experience the emotion again. The info slide says, no, it's just you can download it and replay your memories on a screen. So where they tell you, oh, it's different than from a screen, it is literally on the screen. What you get is visual input and get that being now the same output, and then you get like maybe we have audio, we don't know, that it just says on a screen. Maybe hopefully the screen has audio boxes attached to it so that we can also listen to the memories we've experienced. But so the idea that you are one-on-one re-experiencing something and that will make you so happy and great, that is not the case. What you will get is a video in hopefully HD, and then you can see everything that was going on. You do not get to replay the experiences. That means that all the things that they told us about, oh, better technology in this world because we have to have understood the intricacies of the brain. No, we could theoretically have replay right now, just attach a camera on the side of our head and record everything we ever do in our lives. Just maybe this camera is smaller and hidden and things, but there's no way can any government team claim here that some technological advance has been made. And the last thing, the last thing I'm going to get to within my points. But what we're going to tell you is, okay, how do we remember things? Why do we remember things? And why do they differ from what actually happened or from the visual outputs that we just get? Why this? Yes, we are going to talk about trauma and re-traumatization. We're going to tell you that in society or in a world where this is the norm and everybody has and does this, there will be re-traumatization through bad memories, and it also devalues and takes away happy memories. Now, first about memory and the role in like life for us and what it means to have memory. What is the purpose of memory, right? The things we remember and the way we remember them are usually not factual. We agree with opening government on this, right? What and how we remember things is carefully selected by our brain, and what is selected is not about factuality. It is about something else. It is the version of what happened that we remember is selected on the basis of what version of this event are we able to live and deal with. That is what we end up remembering, and that is what we take away usually from that experience. That means that like this has been an evolutionary mechanism. This is the reason why we forget things. This is the reason why we misremember things. This is the reason why there's different versions of events what happened, because different people like work through the things and interpret whatever happened differently. And even though maybe a camera has an absolute thing of this is what happened visually and what happened if you recorded with an audio, what was said and what voices were heard, but the experience and what we remember and take away from this is highly subjective, because this was an evolutionary mechanism, right? Our brain blurs or suppresses bad memories that we are unable to deal with, right? So that you're not paralyzed by bad memory for the rest of your life and can still live happy on. Same goes with happy memories. Like we usually, like our brain and the way we remember things, usually we inflate the happy memories because, well, just evolutionary people that wanted to live because they thought life was good were likely to like survive, and the people that thought life was shit because they kept remembering all the bad things, well, they were not super enticed to continue living. But yeah, so this is the evolutionary mechanism on like how and why we suppress certain memories and why that is actually a good thing. Now, what opening government starts then telling you is, well, in a world where or like the point I was trying to make from why this then differs from what is recorded is that what is recorded does not represent and does not go through the similar filter of, okay, what we then end up seeing once we push play on that button of the screen that we're looking at, that will be an unfiltered version. We are reconfronted with a version of events that our brain told us, no, this is not the version that we can deal with. Okay, why is this bad? Well, opening government starts telling us, oh, this is so good because when then we are in court, then you can just, oh, look at it and remember all the things that have happened to you. We think that that is exactly the problem, that the expectation will arise that, oh, if you want to have any standing or if you want to have any like standing in terms of, oh, have you remembered this? You will be asked, well, have you played this on your like recording device? And is this actually what happens? So there is then a pressure for you to look at these things that you maybe not necessarily or very likely don't want to look at, but you have to because that is the norm in society. And people expect this from you because, well, after all, you have video recording of this, right? So look at this and then tell us what happened. You're then forced to look at what happened again in all its disgusting detail, in all its disgusting vile imagery. And you are then re-traumatized. Your brain has to go to this exhaustive process of helping you forget that this happened again, making you remember a blurred or different version of it, but you can't. Why? Because now you have to tell the court exactly what you saw. We think that is incredibly unhelpful, especially at the point where this obviously affects you emotionally, because, well, re-traumatization is not known to be like a very good Zen, meditation thing, but usually leaves people not happy afterwards. Now, why does it also devalue and take away happy memories? Let's think about some happy memories, right? Opening government talks about, oh, it was so fun when I was drunk with friends and things were high. Look, the reason why you thought things were funny when you were high is because you were high. If I played a video recording of you and the things that you thought funny while you were high, you will not think that these things are funny, right? Like the reason why you thought were funny is because you were on drugs. The reason why like lots of things are funny when you're drunk is because you are drunk. When like a video recording of this will not like make this have a memory. When you look at this and think, oh, I will replay this funny memory, then you see this in all its flawed detail. You see, oh, that was actually like kind of racist, or oh, this was actually not okay, or this was not funny at all. And like, why did I say this? Why did nobody else do it? Since like it devalues and takes away happy memories. Same goes for example, when she said, oh, looking at loved ones and back and oh, you looking back at loved ones and oh, you're in a room with your mom. Let's say it's a positive memory with your family member. Before I get to that, does closing government have a POI? Like put
just to be
something in chat. Opening.
No, closing. Just to be extremely clear, you like if your claim is that you selectively remember certain things, then it is probably the case that you will obviously also remember like selective things to then watch on the screen. So you probably only want to watch things that are good for you, that probably you derive pleasure.
Yes, and I tell you that there are societal mechanisms in play that then force you to also watch things that you do not want to remember. Note that there are also narratives out there of like, oh, learn from your mistakes. What you should be doing is focusing on your mistakes. So there might be people that are like, oh, I have to focus on my mistakes, look at all the bad things, and I can learn from them and be stronger and shit. Or like the opposite is true when you say, yes, when you look at happy memories and that devalues them. For example, let's say you look at a happy memory from your grandmother that died of cancer, and you remember, oh, when I was 12, we had so much fun in this evening. And you remember this because, well, you were a little child and did not see, for example, or notice, perceive some of the symptoms of cancer she was exhibiting, in what pain she was, and that she was just putting on a happy face for you. But then when you look at this, you see, oh my God, she was suffering. She was in so much pain. How did I not realize? I was such an idiot. I just wanted more cookies and she brought them to me, even though she was in pain. What we're telling you is that this replay device creates toxic societal narratives that devalue happy memories, that force you to re-traumatize yourself by looking at bad memories. And for all of these reasons, proud to stand on opening opposition.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. I'd like to next invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Hi everyone. Super excited to be in this final. Congrats to everyone for making it this far. May I just confirm if I'm audible? All right, perfect. So I'll be taking POIs in the chat, but I will be asking for one between the 5th and the 6th minute. Okay.
Sorry, just to check, can everyone else here can fine?
I'll speak like at this like level.
No,
Sorry.
Yeah, I could hear them. It's just that it wasn't very loud. So yeah, it's fine. I just increased the volume significantly more.
Okay, sure.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The story of our lives follows an epic journey that is often only appreciated in hindsight. We are unaware that the peak of our lives are happening right before us, and oftentimes our best days can be behind us. We cannot tell how our lives will play out, and therefore we must be able to access these memories in a way that makes us happy in the future. Before anything else, I just want to launch a really funny response towards OO, because they simply say that you devalue happy memories because you start remembering things when you were drunk and you're high, and you're not going to enjoy it as much because you'll be sober and it won't be as exciting. My simple response to that is there's a solution to this. Before you watch the memories, you get drunk, you get high, and then you re-experience it again, and things will still be funny. But regardless, I think those experiences themselves still have value, because oftentimes all of the criteria that Jill talked to you about earlier, things like alcohol, cigarettes, they're not necessarily things that make things funny. They're things that remove inhibitants. They make you laugh at things that you would have found funny otherwise, make you dance. All of which are experiences that you would have enjoyed otherwise. And I think this whole devaluing your memory things on their side is a wash. But if you formal, responsive framing, like everything really here is integrated. I swear I'm going to be responsive here. Firstly, how does this interact with reality? Because they simply say at the start of their speech, and this is their big mitigation towards our side, is that this is just a memory on a screen. You're not reliving things. We understand that, and we're very reasonable about that. Make no mistake, these are still memories and do not serve as a substitute for the real world. In fact, just to preempt any analysis that says that you devalue your experiences in the real world, such that you are less likely to pursue these experiences, 4 reasons why that's not true. Number one, the sensory pleasure that watching there are different sensory pleasures that watching and experiencing provides. I think you are more likely to pursue other sensory experiences by just wanting to do things again. 2, I think that you value things that are real. That's why individuals don't just sit around in their room imagining things just because reality has some sort of value towards us human beings. Thirdly, people still find varying degrees of pleasure from new experiences. So I know that I enjoy this memory, but I may enjoy other experiences. So I want to improve my real life. I won't be overly fixated on the past. Fourthly, these are memories that you cannot show to anybody else. And I think individuals just have a desire to share happy moments with other individuals. We're social beings. I think that this is an instinct born out of hunter-gatherer societies trying to make sure that their living life, like the things that they enjoy, are shared with the pack. It ensures survival. All of those reasons say that just because we have this memory, it is still a good thing. Simply because individuals can experience the memory, be happy with the memory, but still be willing to value real life. But why is giving people access to this content valuable? Even if it is only akin towards a very good memory or an external piece of media like a film. So this is us biting the worst case of opposition side, wherein our side simply is a film that you super enjoy because you are a part of it, because you have sentimental value towards these experiences, or maybe even it's just a simple memory that you enjoy reliving. 1, I think that people often have limited access to new experiences, and we ought to give individuals as much access to happiness as possible. possible. What are reasons why individuals may have limited access towards new experiences, and as a result, we should give them as much access towards media and content that makes them happy as possible, right? 3 things. Number 1, I think that the poor can only afford to take so many vacations, are so fixated trying to survive, that the limited happy experiences that they have should be treasured to greater degrees, and reliving it is something that we think that they should. 2, people's bodies, because of illness and old age, can't get new experience, and oftentimes they give up on other bodies, give up on them. So even if they want to pursue new real world experiences that make them happy, it just simply isn't in the card. If I'm crippled, I can no longer go on hikes if that's something that I enjoyed. If I'm an old person, I can't go out and partying if that's something that I like. Thirdly, I think that especially for dying cultures in the wake of global cosmopolitanism, IP groups in particular, their cultural expression, what makes them happy, all of this culture and all of these experiences fade as their culture slowly fades away. What that means is, even though I want to pursue a real world experience in the expression of my culture, oftentimes the avenue for me to do that is extremely limited. And as a result, for me to experience that culture, I must be living in the past. Secondly, second point here, I think that appreciation for these moments is often different from new experiences. The fact that there is sentimental value, that these are pivotal moments in their lives, and the fact that there are people and conditions that will never be repeated, means to say that just reliving this memory makes people happy. And given that a lot of times people don't have access to things that make them happy, that's generally a good thing. And take note that there's no objective means at which life can be valued. So I think that as a result of people just enjoying these memories, enjoying films, and wanting to remember things more, which is something that we can intuitively say is true, granting them the opportunity to remember things better is something that we should be supporting. Before I move on, are there any POIs from closing?
Yeah, so why the hell revisitation of memory in itself is valuable and makes people happy? You never proved this. It's just an assertion.
No, okay, so it's intuitive to say that people like remembering things. These are moments that they value, and therefore watching media and content that is similar to what people value is something good. Insofar as people watch things that are things that they enjoy, like I watch biking videos because I enjoy cycling, means is an intuitive example for why just reliving memories is a good thing. Second extension, then, therefore, I think that the creation of this technology allows for the proliferation of culture that allows individuals to confront their past in healthier ways, which is a direct response to the analysis that we get from OO. 3 things here. Number 1, addressing trauma and unhealthy fixations on the past. I think that the current wave of online narratives pushing people to take care of their mental health and pushing people towards therapy is likely to adapt insofar as we have this technology as well. What does this then therefore look like? It looks like therapists and online tips will likely teach you to confront your trauma when you are ready. By refusing to give these memories trauma, by confronting them and realizing they're not as scary, that they no longer have as much power as you, because you could sit in front of it and watch it and not feel those memories again because you've moved on. The fact that unhealthy fixations on the past, maybe your ex, can be addressed by narratives that teach you to remove the rose-colored glasses, pick up the red flags and negative memories that you refuse to address. That is as to say that given that there's a push for us to be healthier with mental health, push for us to go through therapy, I think that the addition of this technology with this current push that exists in the status quo means to say that this technology will be used in healthy ways. Second, I think to be critical, I think it allows you to be critical of your own behavior. Third, it gives you a third-party perspective of your own experience. You get to ask yourself and actually answer the question, was I toxic? How can I improve behavior? Can I better understand where people are coming from? Because I am no longer viewing by bits and pieces of broken memory. I can actually see what is happening and take an objective stance. Lastly, what are the incentives for healthy users to be prominent? Number 1, people only share tips online. Things only blow up when they actually work. I think if things don't work, there's a natural incentive for us to drop it, to talk about bad experiences, and as a result, people are less likely to support them. So things like media and social media is likely to propagate healthy uses. Secondly, I think that there's an emphasis on research and source validity. So I think there's going to be research on how this technology can be used to be healthier from a psychological and therapeutical standpoint. At the end of the day, memories are good things. We should grant individuals the opportunity to access them. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech, and I'm just going to check with CO because I think the partner dropped or something.
I'm so sorry. My partner went to the bathroom. Could you wait for like 2 seconds? I'm so sorry. We're back, so sorry.
All right, no worries. So again, thanks to the Deputy Prime Minister. We'd like to next invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Give me just a second. All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so a few extraneous points of rebuttal to our before I talk a little bit more about what kinds of memories are going to be watched and why that is bad. Okay, so first of all, one thing coming out of OG of DPM is kind of like that poor people should have as much access to happy memories to make them as happy as possible. I think at the point where you demand to give people access to happy memories to kind of mollify because they don't get good experiences, I think we might as well switch your entire reality towards virtual reality, because that is what would make poor people assumably the most happy, because then you can continuously spend your time having happy memories. Okay, secondly, they tell us in kind of like points, an attempt to kind of mitigate our trauma, a re-traumatization point, is that therapists will give online courses on how to deal with trauma. So trauma therapy is something that is incredibly intense, that takes at least upwards of like 10 sessions. I don't think that most people would cover that through an online seminar. And secondly, even if that is available, they don't explain to us why a lot of people would actually do that and not go into these memories and looking at them with kind of the hubris that they will be able to deal with that without any additional help. Then they tell us that people will get much better at self-improvement because now you get a third-person perspective. I'm going to talk a bit more about like watching memories for self-improvement in a second, but let's first talk about whether this will actually be useful for the people or not. I think that even if you have a third-person perspective, you don't really have a third person perspective when you're watching your own memory, right? You still have kind of like a limited scope of kind of like the visual field that you have. So you can't have access to all the informations that we're passing on throughout the situation that you're watching it. So you never get the full picture, but also you probably are still going to have a certain bias when rewatching that, because you don't initially want to see yourself as the good guy, as the bad guy, even if you were the bad guy in this situation. So it's just very likely that these biases are going to carry on to you when you're watching the memories, specifically when you're watching it alone, as the info slide states, and there's no one to check you up on your behavior. So it's very unclear how you actually get self-improvement there. Okay, so one mitigatory factor. Self-improvement for like taping for self-improvement is something that is already done in lots of high impact cases, like surgeries that are difficult are very often filmed, and so our court cases are almost always recorded. So you have access to what you did in these situations if you want to watch them back for self-improvement. But I think what happens at the point where it becomes the norm and everyone has replay, I think what happens is into the chat, please. I think what happens is that lots of people will watch that at pretty much every occasion that they have. Why is that? Because self-improvement is a narrative that is pretty salient in a current culture where all people want to become the best version of themselves. So I think it is very likely that a lot of people will watch videotapes from basically all the mistakes they've ever made. Why is that bad? Because that means that you're going to have a massive loss of face, because usually our brain kind of makes us semi-forget about those things, because it is incredibly damaging to our sense of self to be constantly confronted with things that made us feel bad about ourselves. So even if we learn a bit about things that we could have made better, we can't really do that much with it, because it also makes us feel like we were acting really, really bad and we should not attempt those things ever again, which is exactly why our brain usually makes us forget about those things, because it's beneficial for our own survival. So you actually make people hurt themselves and hurt their self-esteem if you make them hyper-focus onto that, which is very likely to be happening because you don't get this technology in a narrative. You get this intersecting with a culture that is heavily focused on self-improvement and looking at your own mistakes already, meaning that very many people will be likely to do that a lot. Okay, talking a bit more about traumatization, and then I will take CT, I promise. Okay, so why are people very likely to look at traumatizing memories? I think that there's several reasons why people would do that. First of all, for like the self-improvement thing, like maybe there was something you could have done better in that situation. Secondly, because when something traumatic happens to you, you sometimes question that those things actually happened to you and you want to rewatch it to make sure that they did. Thirdly, because sometimes when you're traumatized, your brain kind of hyper-focuses on that memory and you feel like if you watch it again, maybe you can thus work through it and be done with it. What actually happens is that when you look at traumatizing events, those memories are way more salient and way more interconnected with how your brain perceives the situation than normal situations, meaning that visual triggers probably bring up a lot of other sensory experiences you had in that situation, meaning that you're going to be way more traumatized than if you watch just a memory of, I don't know, you being bad at driving or something. This is something that basically brings up all the feelings you had in that situation, meaning that you're incurring massive emotional trauma that you might not have someone to work through with in that situation because you're going to be alone when you're watching this. Why is that bad? Because here you're getting an actual harm. Not getting to watch your wedding video for the 5th time is not a harm. So even if we don't get that by not having this technology that people can't relive their happy memories, at least we're not incurring actual harm on individuals because they don't have access to things that will actually traumatize them again. Secondly, we think that there's going to be, at the point where this becomes the norm, a certain amount of loss of agency in whether you even want to watch that or not. Why is that? Because at the point where you, for example, can say, where lots of people have this and are equipped with that, and there might be certain benefits in, like, for example, identifying witnesses or suspects in court, there's a very high chance that people are going to be encouraged to rewatch those memories when they, for example, want to go towards court proceedings for someone, meaning that people are not even going to have the agency over whether they want to watch these things, but for example, if they want to take legal actions, they'll be forced to watch those things. Okay, before I go on, I'm going to take a POI from CG if you have any. OG?
Do you say that in most instances people feel like happy about the instances in their lives because of the things they achieve or because of the process through which they achieve them?
I think ultimately people feel happy about the things they achieve. I don't necessarily mind people watching things where they, I don't know, got a good grade, passed an exam, etc. We think for that technology would be useful, but I think it's outweighed by the fact that people could incur massive harms by watching footage of things where they failed or by watching footage of things where they were actually traumatized. Okay, now looking at why happy memories also become worse, because you tend to sugarcoat a lot of the good memories you have. Why is that? First of all, because there's social narratives surrounding good memories. Like, for example, your wedding is supposed to be the happiest day in your life. Your childhood is supposed to be super happy. So you have to tell yourself as an adult that those memories were super happy. And secondly, because our brain likes to sugarcoat happy things for survival reasons and overemphasize them. So now when you rewatch those memories, they're competing with the idea you had about those memories in the years that you didn't watch them, meaning that those memories will probably look pale and unvaluable when in comparison to that, meaning that you're not going to get all the good benefits that, you know, like OG gives us out of those memories, because those are only existent at the point where you don't see the memory, where you still think that that actually was a super happy memory. So for example, looking at childhood memories could be now super sad in hindsight when you know, like, oh, you could already see that your parents were walking towards a divorce, or you could already see that your grandma was having first symptoms of cancer. And I think in these instances, your happy memories are actually wasted on these technologies for all of those reasons. Very proud to oppose.
I thank the dealer for that speech. I'd like to next invite the member of government to open up closing half.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Never in my life have I been more nervous for a final. I mean, the World Cup, of course, because the penalties are happening right now. So a little bit of like multitasking in this final speech. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I think my opening does a really good job in general at explaining the types of things you're likely to want to remember, and like they come up with just many good things, right? The problem is they don't weigh at all, and they don't tell you what the cognitive process is, why people derive significant comfort from those things, and why that fundamentally matters. So it doesn't matter if they say things like, you remember culture, if these arguments exist in a vacuum, not telling you why that matters. I'm going to be the first person in this debate to tell you, irrespective of what people remember and the inner workings of their memories, the mere fact that you know you have this possibility is fulfilling. I think this improves better systems of knowledge. I think this improves interpersonal relationships. Firstly, I want to talk about pleasure and happiness. First, I want to talk about how, like the first thing I want to note is that there's profound fabrication of comfort in knowledge. Irrespective of what you revisit, when, or whether you do it or not in the first place, the sense of control that people that people derive is profoundly satisfactory, and note that it is long-lasting for people's lives. I think that people suffer from not having control in the status quo. People consistently throughout their lives suffer when they know that they are going to lose the memory and of the face on the voice of the of their mothers or their wives who were deceased. I think people throughout their lives feel really, really like bad because they are no longer able to remember certain things about their childhood. I think particularly this is true when the vast majority of people have different forms of like different distributions of happiness throughout their lives. And I think this is a mechanism that is more important and truer than most things that are that the openings have said. I think like it is just profoundly untrue. Like it wouldn't be true to say that all people like enjoy life at the same point. I think that a substantial amount of people are just way happier during their 17s, like their 20s and 20th or whatever, than they are at their 50s, for example. So I think that your ability to relive those things fundamentally means that you are like happy for the rest of your life. The second thing to note is that in the absence of this technology, people have to make absurd efforts to create memories that stick. We'll bite the bullet and say some people might be more comfortable reliving past experiences rather than in some instances creating more and more. But I think that in the first place, there are less like the experiences no longer have like the same degree of diminishing returns. Because if you think that there is something that might be like very scary for you to do, the more like the calculus that you have as an individual is I might not want to do this particular thing because it is a 5-second experience or it is a 1-hour experience, but it just might not be satisfactory. But once you feel like this 1-hour experience is in fact one that can continue throughout your life, it is more likely that two things happen. Number one, people are more likely to tap into their preferences. That is just in terms of the epistemic access that you have to yourself, it is way more likely that you know what you like in life. So it is not just about watching things, it is about what you teach yourself about yourself, and this impacts yourself forever. The second thing to note, and this is like also really important, is that most people are like likely to like just like not like relieve this trauma, right? So I just want to answer something very simple that probably takes 50% of OO out, which is like if it is the case that people want to relieve trauma just to know what they could have done better, just because they're curious and whatnot, they probably will do it once. Because if they do it once and it goes as fucking bad as OO says, then they probably won't do it again and again because we are thinking beings that don't like reliving things that were actively bad for us. I think also that it is, and this is the deadlock that the openings don't manage to solve, it is very hard to eliminate previously created pleasure, whereas it is very easy for you to create new pleasure. So, for example, I think that if you remember that you were very happy during your childhood, and then your parents tell you, like, actually, we were in the kitchen getting a divorce, you don't actually revert to the feeling that you have. People are selective and say, you know what, I'm just going to stick with a happy memory. But the opposite can be true. If there is a bad memory, for example, of you feeling that your parents were being profoundly unfair, or that a partner or a friend of yours was being very bad to you, and then you rewatch the scene and you actually realize that they were actually protecting you, you are indeed more likely to derive the positive thing from that. That is, irrespective of whether the memory is good or not, people have a bias to derive the good things in those memories, and therefore the degree of comfort in people's lives is a maxim in this debate. The last thing to note is that people like process like people are more likely to process their life as like the means to an end instead of the end themselves. Because intuitively, memories work in such a way that you just remember the things that are most impactful. What this means is, if I win Worlds, I will most likely only remember the moment they announce the decision. But it is unlikely that I remember the 10 minutes before the round started. The things that actually make it so that the things are important. The moments like when I was just like practicing alone, the small interactions in my life. I think people are more likely to be curious about those things and access them in other circumstances. Secondly, I want to talk about interpersonal relationships. The first, and I just don't think this is precisely, like, it's similar to what my opening says, but it's different. It's just, it is very unlikely that people ever get gaslit again. I think that people, this is the different impact, get massive self-confidence because they can always just go back to certain things. This also means that you're unlikely to be a person who lies and who treats others badly, because it is likely that if there is social pressures to make you go back to certain memories, as all want to presume, that it is unlikely that you want to leave with that guilt in the first place. People are better in the first place. That is already way more impactful than anything you've gotten in this round. But in terms of interpersonal relationships, I think that people are also more likely to perfect the better versions of themselves. That is, I think in most instances, like for example, I sometimes make mistakes in how I talk to people, but there are things that I don't do on purpose. This is particularly useful for people who might not get social cues. When you can relieve certain circumstances, you can perfect yourself and become a much more empathetic person. Lastly, on the construction of systems of, I'll take one from opening. Cool. On the constructions of systems, Sure. Yeah. On the construction of systems of knowledge, the first thing to note is this levels the playing field. Note that memory is one of the most subjective at birth abilities that determines people's lives. That is, some subsets of individuals just structurally cannot access certain like areas of knowledge because they don't have the same ability to remember. I love math, but I just can't fucking do it, and I can't do STEM just because I don't have the same degree of repetition. Like, this isn't not just like a memory in terms of an anecdote or a lived experience. This is also you looking at yourself, learning things, you being more able to repeat certain processes that allow for you to access different information. The second thing to note is, in terms of systems of knowledge, my opening just says you'll be able to remember culture. But I think the thing that matters the most is you're more likely to interact in terms of the nuances within things. So now history is not just X or Y thing happened. It is rather, how did X or Y thing happen? When you talk to a Holocaust survivor, it is the nuances of the things that they can remember that matters, not just whether X or Y thing happened on a particular date. Nuance matters because you create more knowledge from it, because you derive more information from it. Ultimately, panel, this is a world in which more information is constructed, where you know yourself better, and where irrespective of anything, you are happier. Argentina.
I thank the member of government for that speech. I'd like to next invite the member of opposition.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, I'll take POIs in the chat. All right. So I'm going to start my speech in, sorry, I'm so sorry. I forgot to set my timer. Okay. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, on happy memories, and secondly, on bad memories. So I do agree that this aligns with what opening opposition says. It'll be a vertical extension, but their mechanisms are weak. We'll prove why we win on mechanism and on impact clearly in this debate. This also clashes with what basically OG and CD try to say, that, you know, it's good that you can relive good things, or that it's bad that you know, it's good that you can, like, you know, look back at bad things, etc. Right? So we'll weigh on this as well. Firstly, let's talk about why happy memories are likely to be really bad on their side. So the first thing that I think is a problem with both OG and CG is that they assume is that you watching these memories again is something that is good. This is an assertion because there's no mechanism on why you feel happiness from rewatching something that you've experienced in the past. I think this is very clear. So just because it exists or it was happy in the past, the fact that you rewatch it again doesn't presume that you will gain happiness from this, especially when you notice the concession that OG already made that this is likely to be unreal in these instances. So why do you think this actually makes these memories worse on their side? The first thing is that you start assessing every single mundane thing about these specific instances when you're massively happy. For example, if you massively enjoyed the World Cup and you went and saw your favorite team won, in your memory, you only remember the absolute happiness and the joy that you felt specifically. But now on their side, you assess every situation. This looks like the old guy that was sitting next to you that was eating messily in that instance, for example. This looks like the specific hair strands of every single individual around you that you never actually notice when you were in that instance. It is these mundane things that you're likely to analyze and critically assess when you rewatch this over and over again. It is bad that you look at these details because this isn't the happiness that you arrived at this moment. It is the other things that are distracting you away from the happiness that you had felt in this moment, but you now have to, it basically rewatching this moment basically makes you assess these things or makes you notice the mundane things, and therefore you enjoy the experience less when you rewatch it over and over again in the first place, right? But secondly, I think it's basically repeating these things or repeatedly watching these things makes it less enjoyable in the first place, right? And the reason is because many times specific or special memories are valuable because they are rare. The fact that you enjoyed that vacation so much, or vacations in general are just so amazing, is because it is different from the daily lives that you enjoy, or because it's special. It's a one-time experience that you invested in and you felt so much joy from. People are normalized to things that are special when you rewatch it over and over again. That is why the derived happiness you get from this, rewatching it, basically decreases over time, and therefore you see it as a mundane thing, therefore you can't enjoy it anymore. This is really bad as well. But thirdly, it specifically makes it difficult for you to enjoy it or relive it with other people. This is because now everybody has a conception or a specific, they remember every specific thing in the first place, right? On our side, you do things that connect through the emotions that you felt in that instance, the hyper, like massive tension that you felt in that instance, for example, instead of the specific food that you ate that day, or the specific things that you did that day that you are now likely to talk about in that instance. It becomes very difficult for you to enjoy this in these personalities in the first place, right? But fourthly, in creating new memories, you basically compare each memory that you create newly to the ones that you had in the past, because you can basically do things like watch and compare them, for example, and therefore you're in general less likely to enjoy or think about these new memories as valuable when you always see it as maybe it was not as good as the last one, for example, and if you lose the capacity to be able to enjoy the new memories that you create in the first place. But comparing to this for better, firstly, because you're likely to do things like glorify memories through things like nostalgia, the fact that the emotions that you felt were the most proximate thing to you and the thing that you remember the most, the fact that you talk with your friends about this and relive this actually on our side when you talk about this through the subjective lens that you uniquely have on our side, and you pick out the best moments and the best instances in this place, right? But secondly, it happens once, and that's what makes it special. You lose that on their side. I just want to weigh this against opening opposition. So opening opposition's mechanism of why you get happiness or why you don't get happiness is because if you look at it later on, it might not have been that great, right? So they're like, if you were on drugs, it was great. If you aren't on drugs, it's great. And I think this is an assertion, obviously, because that's not true. But also it can be fun later on. We uniquely prove the mechanism of why rewatching it makes it really bad. And before I move on, I'll take opening.
Okay, so none of these responses to memories are guaranteed. People choose how they interact with their memories, similar to how they choose to interact with media. Not every watching session has to be a critique. Often feel-good memories and media are enjoyed with your brain off. Why is this critique the likely response?
It is likely to happen because you rewatch it over and over again, especially when you say you can now focus on the details, in which that is the next time that you watch it, you probably focus on a different detail. You try to find new things or new involvement, and that is why this is likely to happen on our side. That's why you don't enjoy it on their side. This is important because people being able to enjoy good memories, as all teams concede, define how people can be happy. You lose that on their side, and that's really bad. Secondly, let's talk about why worse memories are going to be really bad. So, okay. The first thing that I want to talk about is why people are actually likely to rewatch this in the first place. So basically opening opposition mechanism here is twofold. The first thing that you say is that you have self-improved narratives that make you watch this. So this doesn't apply to vast majority of cases, right? So if you were a victim of SA or something, you're obviously not going to be forced to do that. The second thing that they say is things like evidence is needed. Obviously, this is also very specific in specific instances. So if you don't go to court about bad things that happen, obviously you don't rewatch it in the first place. So this is very context dependent. The reason why people are likely to rewatch instances that they probably shouldn't do or that are really bad for them mentally is because people are many times irrational when bad things happen to them, right? The first mechanism here is that many times you doubt yourself in these instances, probably because if it was SA, things like victim blaming can happen, or because you yourself feel a doubt because you have entered a sense of a state of irrationality when you face massive emotions that are very strong in the first place, and therefore you want to check for yourself whether this happened or not, and that is why you individually force yourself to watch this in irrational ways even though you shouldn't do so in the first place. But secondly, for example, if your spouse died and you feel really lonely, for example, and you miss them, you try to replace that feeling through this mechanism, and therefore you do this and go watch it on their side. It's better than opening opposition because one, it applies to everyone. Secondly, it's very difficult to mitigate through external factors because it is an individual way in which people interact with this, and it is likely to happen in all instances in which people feel pain. That is why you get re-traumatization for all people, and that is why this is really bad, but that is the way in which you interact with this memory specifically is really harmful. But lastly, I just think even if you do not rewatch the memory itself, the fact that you know that that memory exists, you cannot run away from it ever, in and of itself is really harmful. So for example, if you were a victim of SA, or for example, the fact that you know that that memory can be played when you press a few buttons, the fact that you can't part yourself with that memory, the fact that you know that it exists within you somewhere, or that it exists as a speck of dust somewhere in the world, and you know that it's never going to disappear, that is the point in which you can't move on from these things because you're always going to have to think about that to some extent, or because you know that for some, in some instances, you might be able to rewatch it and re-traumatize yourself. And that is why even if you don't rewatch it, that in and of itself creates a harm for people that are most vulnerable. The piece creates a harm for people that are likely to receive things like trauma in these instances. For these reasons, how to oppose.
I thank the member of government for that speech, and I'd like to invite the government whip to close off the government bench. Here. Whip, are you there?
Yeah.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Memory is an extremely fleeting thing. Oftentimes, when you remember something, you just remember the past time or the last time you remembered that event. You never truly remember exactly what happened, and you're never able to reap the happiness that that memory gives you. And secondly, on our side, you're less likely to forget things because of exogenous influences like stress and trauma. For example, you won't lose the memory of your dead wife's voice because you were stressed and traumatized in that moment. Furthermore, we tell you that okay, in my speech, I'll be engaging with OO and then talking about CO and OG. Moving on then, OO talks about how you misremember things and how selective memory is probably good. First of all, we tell you that like when they talk about cognitive distortions of your memory, you probably see what you saw in the past, and therefore the extent of this doesn't necessarily matter. Secondly, in terms of selective memory, every impact they talk about, like revisiting trauma in court, is very non-mutually exclusive, because people are forced to remember their traumatic proceedings that they take them to court anyway if they want to testify, right? Secondly, we tell you that with replay, you can choose what you want to see, and therefore it's extremely easy to opt out of this. They talk about a lot of conflicting narratives, but we tell you that if the threshold is higher and your trauma was higher, you're very unlikely to go past this. All the 3 mechanisms they gave are not going to be enough to surpass this. Secondly, on people who are actually likely to revisit bad experiences, they're probably people who weren't hurt that much and who are able to actually relive their past experiences and probably get past it, right? They talk about the narrative of self-improvement, but we tell you that this only applies to people who made mistakes or weren't massively traumatized because of PTSD and other deterrent factors that wouldn't watch them. This means that the narrative of self-improvement and watching past experiences actually creates a positive resolution where you're actually able to learn from your mistakes, right? Secondly, for people who had bad moments and actually want to revisit them in order to get over them, like how people go with trauma go to therapy and talk about what happened to them again and again to solve their process their emotions. You can do this at home similar to what you do in therapy. And secondly, this improves mental health for people who feel lonely and unloved. That is to say, if you are widowed or if you're just going through a low moment in life, you can go back to a memory that you were with a lot of people or the person that you loved, and you're able to go past the worst moments in your life and get yourself out of that slump, right? Secondly, we tell you that when they talk about taking the happiness away from memories, if it's a memory that you realize was bad in the future, we tell you that that might be a good thing. If you were drunk or intoxicated and the memory wasn't actually good, maybe it causes you to not relive those mistakes. Secondly, when they talk about sugarcoating, this is echoed in CO as well. They talk about how it's not going to be and it's not going to make you happy because you remember the mundane things. It's not sugarcoated anymore. A couple of responses. Firstly, we tell you that the emotions that you felt in the moment are heavily tied to memories. The reason why rewatching these memories is still going to be very valuable is not only do you see the memory, you remember the emotion that you felt in the past and you feel even happier, maximizing your happiness, right? But secondly, if a specific memory starts to lose its value, then you just leave it aside for a moment and then come back when you want to remember it again. And therefore people are rational actors that won't completely waste away their happiness, even if you buy oppositions mechanisms. Thirdly, the rarity of happy memories makes them the rarity of happy memories still like makes them happy is not logical, because people like think of how people rewatch shows and re-enjoy them and like choose to watch them, right? But secondly, like the simple fact that you recorded a concert and rewatched it again doesn't make the concert worse. This applies to your own memories, and like even if like the rarity aspect exists, people know when to like sparse it out, right? The difference on their side of the house is that they never really give an impact that people can't avoid by simply choosing not to. And secondly, we believe that this is like this is very marginal. Note that CO completely decided to disengage with our arguments on interpersonal relationships, the construct of knowledge, and like the nuances of history, like ignoring all of our like more practical benefits as well, right? Before I move on, I'll take a POI from opening. Closing.
Look, social narratives that would emerge in the world you stand for, from self-improvement over journaling to self-therapy, put large pressure on people to read or watch bad memories, as we explained in all. Why would you care about the number of times you can watch the world's finale when you're expected to focus on the bad?
You're not expected to focus on the bad. Massive assertion that these like narratives are going to be about focusing on the bad, okay? If you have this technology, obviously people are going to want to be happy. I just don't understand that. And I already dealt with the narrative of self-improvement and who it necessarily affects. If you concede that, a lot of people are going to probably be better in this world. Anyway, moving on to why we differentiate from OG. We tell you that a lot of their like initial arguments are very marginal. For example, things like drunken family gatherings. Secondly, they explained how like experiences are limited, but they didn't explain why these memories inherently like make you happier on the counterfactual. Furthermore, they don't engage with the broader population, hyper-fixating on smaller groups, right? Thirdly, they never weighed themselves against the comparative. We're going to weigh ourselves against the opposition team and differentiate ourselves from opening through a number of things. Firstly, we tell you that you are happier because you're able to stop questioning the past, because you can watch exactly what happened and actually enjoy the present as it is, right? Secondly, the past reminds you of your happy memories and you're able to amalgamate that happiness, and it adds on top of each other. Note that the like accumulation of happiness is like unique comparative on like from opposition, right? Thirdly, you motivate yourself to do things in the future. That is to say, the happy memories of your past make you a happier person, or they motivate you, or like it